Welcome to Cosmic Potato, the Super Fan Talk podcast.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy.
We've got you covered with everything from Marvel to Star Wars.
Glad you asked that because I wanted to take this time to explain my evil plan.
Classic films, trivia games, and beyond.
Come out to the coast, we get together, have a few laughs.
Now, on with the show.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Cosmic Potato, the Super Fan Talk podcast. My name is Sean Ray, and I'm currently broadcasting from the surface of the sun. The heat index today was 110 in my part of Alabama. So, sitting across the virtual table from me is a guy that may or may not be experiencing a Peter tingle, Mr. John Irons. And if you get that joke, listeners, you're laughing. If you don't get that joke, I'm not going to explain it because when you figure it out, you will laugh.
Well, no, I got it. I'm just not sure how to respond.
And also from the Wait You've Never Seen podcast, we have Virginia. How's it going?
Good, not quite as hot here.
What is the temperature in Texas today? Or you're part of Texas anyway?
It got up to, I think, 98 today, but that's just regular temperature. I stay inside most of the day because that's just nonsense. No, nobody needs to be out in that.
And from the Prime Direction, we have Mr. Scott. How's it going, sir?
I am on vacation from work all week, and the house is empty except for me. I haven't been drinking vodka. You've been drinking vodka. Leave me alone. Get off my back.
What's the temperature in Michigan so we can all be jealous?
When I was outside mowing the lawn today, it was between 81 and 84.
I knew it. I knew it was going to be nice and comfortable. And back by popular demand, we have the Joe Crowe. How's it going, sir?
Hey, everybody. Irving Popular, my accountant. It's an old 60s joke.
All right, so
this is my first time sharing a podcast with Joe, and I'm not disappointed so far.
Oh, you never been on with Joe before?
Nope.
He has. You have.
I have.
You have.
Oh, was I in Captain Game Show?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, Joe. My first Cosmic Potato with Joe.
Well, we when
You try to block them out. I understand. I do the same.
Well, I didn't have his face on Captain Game Show. I can see him now.
with Captain Game Show, it's so intense. We're all so focused on not abjectly failing, and which I frequently do on that show. And so I don't keep track of anybody that I spend a podcast. So I understand. I completely understand. It's all a blur.
Our topic tonight is going to be movie court. And this is a topic that's based on something that Joe did at Magic City Con. And I'm assuming you're going to do it at Dragon Con this year as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So it's basically people's court for bad movies. And I'll explain it a little more when we get into it. But before we get into that, there's some other stuff that I want to cover. First, I want to plug a new project that I'm working on. So if you listen to the other shows on the network, then you probably know Troy Wood. He's one of the hosts on World War G. And we're doing a new show together called the Mayberry Files. And it's Files with a PH. And we're watching and reviewing all of the Andy Griffith Show. And we released our first episode this week. We took a look at the backdoor pilot that Andy Griffith was on an episode of Make Room for Daddy, where he plays Andy Taylor, so aka the Danny Thomas Show, Make Room for Daddy, kind of the same show. What were you saying, Virginia?
Oh, I just said I had no idea. Like, my dad is a diehard Andy Griffith fan, and his dad, and I had never heard there was a backdoor pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Learn something every day.
The Andy Griffith Show was technically.
I know the show, Make Room for Daddy. I didn't watch it much, but I remember it. And I had no idea that that's where Andy Taylor first showed up. That was news to me, too.
Yeah. season 7, I think, of Make Room for Daddy. Make Room for Daddy. They changed the name of the show in the 3rd season. It turned into the Danny Thomas Show, but yeah, they did a backdoor pilot with Andy Griffith, and it wasn't. He was playing Andy Taylor, and he was a small town sheriff, but it wasn't really the Andy Griffith Show. You didn't have all of the other characters. You had Andy, you had Opie, and you had the lady that played Aunt Bee played a different character in this episode and everything. But, so we broke down that episode on the first episode of the Mayberry Files. And then next week, we'll be releasing our second episode where we actually talk about the official first episode of the Andy Griffith Show. So the plan is to go through the entire series and hopefully eventually make it into even Mayberry RFD, if anybody's ever heard of that show. And
not Gomer Pyle USMC.
You got to get to Gome.
It's too much. It's too much. It's too much. I mean, because that's another 5. Because we're only doing 2 episodes a month.
Uh-huh.
So it's already. I mean, if we stick that schedule, it's going to be like 10 years before we get through the series. So Gomer Pyle is that may be a little too much of a undertaking, but we'll see. I also want to review a couple of things. So, and I'm going to do this spoiler free, very spoiler free.
You say
because
that.
me and John have failed.
I'm not going to spoil it because
broke our Marvel cards.
I'm not, because I want to. There are things about Spider-Man Far From Home that I really want to talk about, but I'm not going to because I'm the only one here that's seen it, and I don't want to spoil it for you guys. And I don't want to spoil it. If any of you guys had seen it, then we would do like a spoiler-filled episode or whatever, and just warn the audience that there's spoilers. But since you guys haven't seen it either, then I'm not going to do that. We'll do that in another episode.
I would say I'm very scared because I think sometimes things that you don't think of as spoilers, I consider.
I'm not even going to get into the plot. I'm not even going to get into the plot. I'm just going to say that there is nothing bad that I can say about this movie. I thought that this movie was a fantastic follow-up to Endgame. I like the way that Marvel, when they have their kind of heavy movies like Infinity War and Endgame, they follow that up with something fun. Like they followed up Infinity War with Ant-Man and the Wasp, which is lighthearted and fun. And they followed up Endgame with Spider-Man Far From Home. So
would you say it's a better movie than Homecoming?
I would say it is on par with Homecoming. Oh, I don't know if I would say it's better. I would say it's as good, at least. I had forgotten. I haven't seen Homecoming since it came out, so I had forgotten how much of Homecoming was like a John Hughes teen comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reminded of that watching this because the other teens, the other characters, they had a lot to do in this movie, and I like that. And also, I will say that that you know what? That's all I'm going to say. And Samuel L. Jackson.
Sean could sense my sphincter tightening. No.
Samuel L. Jackson is in the movie more than you think he would be. I was expecting him to just have a cameo because they showed him in the trailer. So I was expecting that to be the scene that he's in. But he's in it a lot more than that. And I guess they're kind of making up because, in Homecoming, they had Robert Downey Jr. in the movie a lot. And I guess they're making up for that. They want to have another Avenger level character showing up a lot throughout the movie. So so Samuel Jackson is that character, I guess. It had great effects. It had a good, engaging plot. Out of 5 spider webs, I give it 4. 4 solid. It's a solid 4. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say about it. In 2 weeks or so, when we do our next episode, we'll do a full spoiler review. So by that time, Scott will have seen it. John will have seen it. Joe will probably have seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if Rick has seen it or not, but I'm sure he'll have seen it by then. So we'll have Rick on, and Virginia. You don't really go watch Marvel movies that much, right?
We're still catching up on them because I hadn't started watching them till like this year. And we just finished the first Guardians of the Galaxy this past weekend. So I think we're up to Age of Ultron. I didn't really like it.
What?
Boring.
No, court
Sorry.
now.
I thought you were gonna say it was stupid. Stupid, I'd accept, but boring. That's surprising.
My wife was speaking to me. Which one did you say you didn't like?
Guardians of the
Guardians
Galaxy.
of the Galaxy, the first one.
I like it.
I mean, I laughed at it wasn't exactly what I expected. Like, I enjoyed the other Marvel movies more, so I guess I was expecting more, and it just kind of let me down. And I'm like,
I can see that. It is a departure from the formula. So if I can see that.
But I did laugh a lot. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
I will say that if you go see Far From Home, it's not going to spoil any of the other Marvel movies except for Endgame. You need to
except for the major one.
Yeah. That's the thing. It will spoil Endgame for you, so you don't have to have seen all the other Marvel movies to see that, but you really have to have seen all the other Marvel movies to watch Endgames.
Yeah,
not all of them.
No.
I mean, I made a list.
I would say I'd say you only have to have seen Infinity War to get Endgame. Like you won't get everything in it, but you'll follow the plot itself if you have not seen any other Marvel movie. Like the little touchdowns and stuff won't mean as much, but you'll be able to follow the plot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you go into Infinity War without having ever seen a Marvel movie before, you won't drown, but you won't swim very well either.
And
why are these webs coming out of his hands? What is going on?
Yeah.
And the other thing that's out now that I've watched recently is Stranger Things season 3 came out on the 4th of July, and I watched the whole thing. Well, I mean, it's only 8 episodes, so but I watched the whole thing over the weekend. I was a little hesitant going in because season 2 wasn't as good for me as season 1.
Mm-hmm.
But season 3, I think, is the best season so far. I think it was really good.
I really liked it as well.
Have you watched the whole thing?
We watched the whole thing that day that it came out. And I mean, there were things that I didn't like about it. Like, I'm thinking on his name, Hopper. Why is Hopper such an asshole? But
he's always been.
I mean, that's true. But he seemed a little extra this season. But overall, very interesting. I was held by the storyline and everything. So I liked it.
I mean, we got some new characters. We got some really good development on some old characters. There were new monsters. The Russians are in it. I mean, you can't have a show set in the 80s without eventually involving the Russians, right? So, and the mall that they built for this.
Oh my God, the mall was everything. I loved it.
Perfectly 80s. It looked exactly like Eastwood Mall from when I was a kid.
Oh, dang.
It did look like Eastwood Mall.
Now, I've never seen a single episode of Stranger Things of any of the seasons. I just haven't gotten around to it. It's on my list, and I will watch it. But we're talking about an 80s mall, so I have to ask. Do they have little ashtrays in the mall next to the waste baskets with, like, the white sand in it so people can smoke in the mall?
I have to go back and pay more attention.
There is a lot of smoking everywhere.
Yeah, there is a lot of smoking. There was a story that came out this week that said that Netflix is going to cut back on some of the smoking in shows like Stranger Things. You're not going to see as much smoking next season as you did because Hopper smokes a lot, you know.
And so does Joyce.
Yeah, and they're gonna and that's not the only show.
They're just gonna be walking around with nicotine patches or something.
Yeah.
Season 4 confirmed.
Oh, I haven't heard anything official, but I can't see. It broke records. More people have watched the entire season of Stranger Things in the first 4 days after it was released than have binge watched anything else in the history of Netflix. So
and you know, probably not a bad idea to release it on a day that everybody's off work too.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even watch it until the next day because I mean I was off on the 4th, but I had a lot to do. You know? So we we had the by the time the fireworks are over and you get home, it's almost midnight. So I got home late on the 4th and I was all sweaty. I'd been outside all day and I was like, I'm supposed to release an episode of Captain Game Show. And
I wasn't going to say anything, Sean. I
texted John and I was like, it'll come out in the morning. I released it as soon as I got up the next morning.
Perfectly fine.
Maya Hawke is in season 3. And if you don't know who she is the daughter of Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke.
What?
And she plays the girl that works at the ice cream place.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Carrie Elways is there as well, playing the mayor, Mayor Larry. Was he in the last season? I don't remember seeing him. He's a new character.
He is a new character.
Yeah.
All right. Has anybody else seen anything that they want to tell us about before we go into the topic?
We've been watching the season 2 of, and I never know how to pronounce it. It's either Agretsuko or Agretsuko. We've been watching that a little bit slower because we have to read the subtitles. But it's very entertaining, especially if you have like a weird office vibe and need to get some of the energy out by death metal. I really like it. I recommend it.
My wife enjoys it, and she watched the first season, and we had a little bit of time earlier this week, so she wanted to watch it, and I was just going to be like, in the room. She brought home food, and that's a good way to lure me to the television. And she had the remote first, so she gets to drive. So I had seen a few episodes of the first season, and I ended up seeing like the first 3 or 4 episodes of this new season of, and it's Agretsuko.
Gotcha. Okay.
Unless I'm getting it very wrong, I think the emphasis is on the second. But that show is just adorable.
I've seen a few episodes. I saw the first few episodes. I liked them, but it's like you and Stranger Things. It's like I intend to get around to it, but there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yes, I was talking to Scott this morning on Facebook, and I said, yeah, we're gonna talk just a little bit about season 3 of Stranger Things. He's like, Stranger Things, I haven't seen it yet. And I was like, what? That show was made for you, man.
Pretty much.
I would be interested to hear what you think after you finish the first season. I think you're gonna love it.
I'll try to push it up on my list. I know I can't really explain why, but lately I've felt compelled less to watch television than I normally do. I've been doing more like just some leisure time Facebook stuff or reading or trying to up my Twitter presence and my networking, things like that. I've just taken less time to watch TV. Even this week when I'm home alone and no work to go to, I think the only time that I've sat down in front of the television was to play a little bit of Star Trek Online. I didn't even watch anything. Any viewing that I've been doing.
You didn't watch Home Alone?
No. But that's hilarious. I'm laughing inside.
I can tell.
That reminds me. Go ahead, Scott.
And any viewing that I've been doing lately has been either a rewatch of Star Trek: The Next Generation or a continuing rewatch of Stargate SG-1. Just I'll put it on in the background, usually while I'm doing something else.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I've gotten. I don't know what it is. I guess it's because I'm kind of sleep deprived. I work another job on the weekends that is a night job, and I've gotten to the point where if I start to read, I fall asleep. So in the last year, I've probably read about 4 pages.
The same 4 pages.
Yeah, I've been in that place for about 15 years.
Yeah. I used to read all the time. I mean, but just in the last couple of years, it's been very hard to focus on reading anything without just dozing off. But all right. Oh, when John mentioned Home Alone, that reminded me of a story that I heard over the weekend that Ryan Reynolds is kind of remaking Home Alone, but it's going to be about a stoner.
Oh my God.
It's going to be called Stoned Alone.
Oh my God.
But it's basically the same plot as Home Alone, but it's about a grown dude that's just high. And I think that the people that are breaking into his house are illusions or hallucinations or something like that.
If you had said that James Franco was making that, I would have believed it. Ryan Reynolds, now I'm skeptical.
See, we'll see.
Maybe what they should do is, instead of doing Stoned Alone 2 and 3, which inevitably this is going to be a mega franchise, have each successive sequel be another weird altered state. The next movie will be Drunk Alone.
Yeah.
And the third movie will be
Dumped Alone.
Whacked out on goofballs alone. And,
Bath salts alone.
Yep. It'll just get worse and worse.
They do the classic. There was a thing that they used to do in the 80s where when they would make a sequel to a movie as a cash grab, but they didn't have the original star, they would call it like Teen Wolf, but it would be TOO instead of the number 2. You know, like this is Teen Wolf 2, even though it's not the same guy. You know, it's another Teen Wolf. So
Jason Bateman.
Yeah. Hey, Jason Bateman is awesome. Everything that he comes up in, I'm like, yeah, he's pretty hilarious.
Not Teen Wolf 2.
Yeah, no, not Teen Wolf 2. Okay. Let's do movie court. So we've all brought some examples of films that are usually considered to be bad, and we're going to make an argument as to why they are actually good movies. And after we put that out there, then the others here on the panel will either agree with us that yes, it is a good movie, or they will make their arguments as to why no, that's a terrible movie. I object, that kind of thing. And Joe is here to play judge, and he will make a verdict as to whether or not that movie is crap.
I have brought my official judge's gavel.
You didn't wear your robe.
Where's your poofy
wait a minute. Hang on. The robe's coming.
He's going to put on the robe.
Oh my God. That's dedication right there.
Yeah. If you're listening to the podcast, you need to go check out the YouTube channel because Joe is putting on the robe.
Are those wizard's robes?
This is a Nature Boy Ric Flair robe.
Yes, it is.
Wait. No, let me see if I.
Can you show us the back?
That's it.
The baby's sleeping in the other room. I can't get too loud. Can you show us the back?
Let me see if I can show you the back. Hold on. I'm just going to take it off and show you the back.
What?
Sorry if I wait for him on that, guys.
The back says Nature Boy. It says Ric Flair. See that?
That's
It's
awesome.
the best. It's the best of all robes.
Okay. So, Virginia, you want to go first? We'll say ladies first. You want to bring us a movie that a lot of people think are bad, is a bad movie, but you don't think it really is?
Okay. So, the first one that I have down is Star Trek V: The Final Frontier.
That's the same one I brought up. We did this at a panel at Magic City Con, and that was the same one that I came up with.
Y'all keep freezing, so I missed what y'all just said. Sorry.
Oh, I said we did this as a panel. Joe did this as a panel at Magic City Con, and that's the same movie that I came up with.
So I think it's, kind of the whole finding the center of the universe is. I really like it as you get to really see the friendship between Kirk and Spock and Bones throughout the whole movie. Like you start out in the camping scene, and then you find out later in the movie, well, maybe they don't know as much about each other as they thought. And you have this scene with where Sybok is showing them their past or the mistakes they've made or whatever. And at the end, they're back in the camping scene, and I just think it really shows a lot more of the relationship than we get in the other movies. And also, Bones has some amazing one-liners, like, you don't ask the Almighty for his ID. I mean, how can you not love that? That's all I'm saying. And that's really all. I wasn't sure how long my defense should be.
No, that's fine. Yeah, and then we'll either agree with you or make objections. But I tend to agree because I made the same argument when we did this at the convention, in that there's the main thing that I said was that, number one, if you don't have Star Trek V in your box set, then part of the Enterprise is missing in that picture.
Valid argument.
And then the other one was that it is a gold mine for trivia questions because no one ever gets them. Because that's the Star Trek movie that everybody skips. So, but I went back and watched Star Trek V not too long ago, and it's not. I mean, I have seen worse movies. I've seen worse movies. I mean, as far as the Star Trek movies go, it's the last in the line. It would be the last one that I would watch, but it's not that terrible. So, John, Scott,
it's pretty terrible. Now, I'm not going to say that it's beyond redemption, but there's a lot wrong with it, and the potential that it had to be among the generally considered good Star Trek movies, they missed out on a lot of it. The script was quite shaky. And I like to believe that Shatner did the best he could with what he had as far as directing, but a lot of things missed the mark. There's not a whole lot of, really memorable shots in the movie that you remember that visual and it sticks with you like there are with some of the other movies, except for seeing Uhura doing her naked fan dance from a distance.
Okay.
That's the visual that people come away with. That and the three-boobed cat lady from the bar. That's what people remember as far as the visuals go. But aside from introducing Marshmallow into the vernacular and Bones' line at the beginning, God, I liked him better before he died.
Oh my God, that's so great.
Great line. Marshmallows, the little marshmallow dispenser that Spock had, they sold that in the stores. If you bought jet puffed marshmallows, you could get the dispenser, and we had one. But that's really all you can really take away from the film. The script isn't great. I don't know what they were thinking with the costumes. The production design seemed very drab. Just so many things about it could have been so much better if they had kept the story and the script, but just made the movie better, like from a production standpoint, then that really could have brought it up several notches, and it wouldn't necessarily be such a choice of deciding, okay, what's going to go at the bottom of my list? Is it going to be Star Trek V or Insurrection?
Nemesis.
Yeah, and see, I'm in the boat of people that I like Insurrections. But Star Trek V, I think I
will
think
clear this courtroom.
Order in the court. I'll have a ham and cheese on rye. If I remember correctly, Star Trek V, for some reason, they took a lot of money away from the budget before they started shooting. So Paramount started taking money from the budget. So they had a script and they had an idea of what they wanted to do, and then they weren't able to do much of it because they lost a lot of money before they were actually started making the movie. And it seems like Shatner really took was trying to take some cues from Star Wars, because there was a lot of that, there was a cantina type scene, and there was some sound effects that sounded like they were taken straight from Lucasfilms. Some phaser blasts that sounded a lot like blasters from Star Wars, things like that. But yeah, Shatner, if they had picked a different director, I think they could have gotten a better movie out of it.
Well, obviously.
Shatner's not, directing is not his forte.
No.
John, you're sitting there all silent. You have an argument? Or you just agree?
I remember the Uhura scene, since you mentioned it. I vaguely remember the three-boobed lady. I'm sure I've seen it once, and that's all I can tell you. I vote yay, Jordan. I'm sure it was fine.
Are you making your dogs watch it right now?
No.
The camping scene I really like. It's corny, but I really like the camping scene at the beginning of the movie. I do not like the mountain climbing scene. Huh?
Who was the villain in Star Trek 5?
Spock's half brother, Cybok.
Yeah, no, don't remember it. I know enough about it just based on conversations that I've had with all of you.
Yeah. But at the beginning, Kirk is climbing that mountain, and Spock comes up with rocket boots.
Rocket boots, yeah.
And when Kirk falls off, Spock like puts his hands up in the air like he's gonna fly like Superman, and turns upside down and goes down with the rocket. That's not how rocket boots work. Like rocket boots are a real thing.
Yeah, I'm like, okay.
All right, Joe, what's the verdict?
Movie court is dividing this case into two parts, and the part of the case where we're talking just about McCoy and just about the camping scene and just about the human parts, the cast members' interrelationships with each other. That part is not guilty of being a bad movie. However, the what does God need with a starship? the three-boobed cat lady, the letting William Shatner do whatever he wants when that's not necessarily justified, guilty as charged.
All right. John, you want to go next?
I'll go next.
All right.
Here, let's do this one. Green Lantern.
Oh.
And I was trying to get Scott while he was. I couldn't quite get a spit take. So here's the thing. Green Lantern came out, after there've been several successful Marvel films. Everybody loves Ryan Reynolds. Had a nice budget, had good actors. Everyone was expecting much, much more. If you go in cold, if you go in fresh, Green Lantern is fine. It's not the best movie in the world, but it's fine. It's an okay film. The effects are good. The plot is fine. The characters are engaging. I'm not saying it's great. I'm just saying it's not terrible. Like, people shit a lot on Green Lantern.
For the record, will the stenographer note that is 2, it's not terribles. In defense of movies tonight.
That may be the only defense we have for some of these.
Perhaps I misunderstood the assignment.
Counselor, please continue.
No, I watched Green Lantern and I thought that it was fine. I was entertained. But, to hear people tell it, there are many really, really, really terrible comic book movies out there, and Green Lantern just doesn't deserve to be among them. It's I liked it. Again, it's not the best movie, but especially when you compare it to other DC movies at the time, it rises green heads and shoulders above the rest.
The biggest failure of Green Lantern is that it's better than comic book movies like Steel or
Batman v Superman.
Yeah, well,
that is a whole entire different case. Counselor, please.
But it came out post Iron Man, so it has. I don't know. Iron Man kind of set the standard because the MCU kind of was built from that,
right?
And so when DC comes out with a movie after that, when there's such because it came out in what 2013, 2014,
something like that.
So you're talking you are talking about the same time as like Thor: The Dark World. So Thor: The Dark World, Green Lantern is not worse than Thor: The Dark World.
No, it's not, and it's like visually it is darker than I think it should be. But I mean, that's really the movie is fine. It's really okay. I feel like Green Lantern suffers from inflated expectations. If you take it on its own, even if you're a Green Lantern fan, it's an okay movie. Maybe it was a dumb choice to make his suit CG. Okay, and again, it's visually dark. Okay, but the plot goes along fine. The acting's fine. The chemistry's fine. It's at worst it's fine, which is not, and it does not. Yeah. Sorry,
bailiff.
Pet comedy. Yeah, so that's that. Yeah, that's
what. Does anybody have any objections?
Yeah. I'm abstaining because I have not seen it.
To tell the truth, I've only seen about the first half of it, and the biggest I said the biggest failure more than once in this. It was boring. To me, the special effects were not bad because it was better than a lot of what was coming out at the time. It was worse than. Go ahead.
I would object to that because I would say if you've only seen the first half, obviously you see it before it ramps up. You're seeing if you saw the first half, basically that's introducing the characters. He got the ring, and he just got to. I don't remember if he went to OR, but wherever he went to get his Green Lantern training. So that's before the training. That's before the big fight. That's before a lot of the stuff happened.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
And I will object mildly. I will admit that just taken just on its own, it's not a horrible movie. But when you factor in that they already had a few frameworks to reference, not copy, but to just look back on and refer to in other decent comic book movies, they should have been able to construct a more streamlined, more cohesive film than what we got. You got, if it's a film that's introducing such a large character as Green Lantern and also introducing the entire Green Lantern Corps all in one movie, then pick a villain and stick with it, and maybe not a villain that is the personification of fear itself, like Parallax. Maybe just have it be Henshaw, played by whichever Skarsgård they had laying around studio that week. Who I was not pulled in by that villain. I was not entertained. I was not engaged by him. And then you get such wild playing with the reality of physics, like when Hal first has the ring and he takes the one swing and the huge green fist hits all those other guys. Guess what, Hal? You just killed a bunch of guys because look what it did to them. There's no way that they're going to be walking away from that. And then the producers decide to commit some severe overreaching by trying to make the entire suit CG instead of making an actual, like, suit made of cloth like Green Lantern actually wears. Just a lot of these decisions that they made came together not in the best way, and a lot of it, I will admit, comes down to expectations. And I'm going to have to let the judge decide whether or not that warrants a guilty verdict. Green Lantern, Jonah Hex, it ain't. I will admit that. But with a character so rich and beloved as Hal Jordan, if you're going to turn that into a movie, then you got to do it right, because a lot of people are going to be looking forward to it. There's going to be a lot of expectations, and you need to come closer to those expectations than it did. So it's not that the quality was so low, but the bar was so high, and the distance between the bar and where they actually reached, that's where the problem comes in.
I think, yeah. I mean, I feel like we're saying the same thing, but I think the spin is I'm using it to defend it. And I would also say, you make a fair point about the complexity of the plot and the villain, but in this one, Sinestro is introduced and he's still an ally by the end of the film. So clearly they had a larger plan in mind, for the scope and the sequels, for this film. If they knew that they were going to do a one and done Green Lantern movie, they probably would have just made Sinestro the villain. So, is it wrong to hope for too much? Is it wrong if they are guilty of anything?
Your Objection, Your Honor. He's toying with our emotions.
That is not against the rules.
If they were guilty of anything, it was hubris.
If they're guilty of anything, it was hope. They hoped that they would have more than one film to tell their story. They hoped that the comic book populace would be more forgiving. and you know what? Let's try a CGI suit. Let's try this. Let's try that.
Doesn't every movie maker hope that?
Yes.
Yeah.
What was it? Their goals exceeded their grasp or whatever. They took a lot of, I wouldn't even say big risks. They took a lot of small risks, and some of them didn't work. But again, overall, on its own, it's not a bad movie.
Okay, Judge.
Okay, testimony that was not delivered by the counselors was that includes such testimony as so I cannot rule on the following testimony. Deadpool went back in time and fixed all this.
That's true.
And so all of our criticism, all of the counselors' criticisms were fixed by Deadpool. So that would have been an easy not guilty. However,
that's actually why
evidence
I didn't bring
was
it up.
not presented to me.
I didn't. I intentionally did not bring that up for that reason.
So, based on the giant-headed villain Hector Hammond, and the court understands, if you have never had a Green Lantern film before, and you have 2 hours to do a Green Lantern film, maybe you feel like I have to put every single thing I have in my Green Lantern bucket into this movie. And that is what they did. And I get it. But I feel that the counselor, Mr. Mr. Irons, Esquire. I believe that your fire and brimstone rhetoric, your soaring metaphors. I believe that I'm going to have to render it not guilty of being a bad movie.
Thank you, Rob.
All right. Scott, go ahead with your
until we sidebar. Until we have another Green Lantern movie, I feel that it is best that we render it guilty for now, but not with extreme prejudice. We can revisit this at a later date. If
that seems
any
fair.
other Green Lantern thing ever happens.
It's on probation. At least he didn't have to stoop to the Deadpool defense to win on technicality. So there's
I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that. It did occur to me.
I appreciate your candor.
All right, Scott, go ahead with yours.
Okay, I'm going to start with the one that I want to see exonerated the most. So leading with my best. And this would be the classic. Hold on a second. I got it around here somewhere. From 19. Come on. Oh, nope, I don't have it on there. From somewhere in the 80s, I assume. The wonderful, the classic Canon Films production of Masters of the Universe.
Not guilty. I'm just kidding. Please.
We can talk because it's on my list too.
Well, coming in with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 17% from the critics and audience score of 40%. Most people seem to think that this movie is bad. Now, I know that there's also plenty of people like me who set aside the fact that it's from Canon Films. They set aside the production troubles. They set aside the casting of Dolph Lundgren and their complaints that he can't speak clear English. A lot of people like me set that aside and say it's a good movie. But I think that it's just a very nice movie across the board. It's not amazing. It's not gonna blow your mind, but it's a perfectly serviceable film. I will start, however, with the things that are not so great about it. The fact that a film based on such a heavy sci-fi.
I'm sorry. I had to step away for just a moment. I heard Dolph Lundgren, bad accent. A film based on sci-fi. Are we talking He-Man?
We are.
Okay.
We're actually actually the name of the film is Masters of the Universe.
Right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Do not interrupt the counselor again.
For a film that was based on an animated sci-fi property like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, set on an entirely different world, it did end up giving the film a bit of a cop-out feel by setting most of it on Earth. Though you can understand that due to budgetary constraints, they couldn't do the whole thing on huge, massive sets. They needed to save a little bit of money here and there. So they set the movie on Earth, and in addition to saving money, that also helps for non-cartoon fans, people who are new to the franchise. It gives them an entry point by letting them have a couple human POV characters to serve as the audience surrogates. So the cheapness kind of hurts it a little bit, but it still services the movie. And then there are other ways in which they cut corners. Some of the costumes maybe not the best. Some of the special effects not as polished as they could be, even considering it was made when it was made. And then of course there's the final fight scene, which they were preparing to film in a large, expansive, well choreographed duel between He-Man and Skeletor, and someone from the studio came up to the camera and held a piece of paper in front of the camera saying, "You're done, shut it down," because they were out of money. So they had to scramble, and they ended up throwing together a quick, low-budget sword and staff fight scene between He-Man and Skeletor, filming it in low light, barely rehearsed, and that's what ended up in the final film. But it still works. That's not awful. It's just filmed in a style not like what you would expect for a movie like that. And those are the negatives. Then we get on to the positives. The soundtrack is better than you think, really. Go back and listen to the opening theme without watching the rest of the movie. Just listen to that opening title theme. It's pretty baller.
Does it have synth music?
Not that I can recall. I think it was all full orchestral.
Okay.
Now, people might complain about how Dolph Lundgren sounds, but you can't say he doesn't look the part. He definitely looks like He-Man, considering his build and the hair. And those who complain that his accent is too heavy, even though they gave him 3 chances to go back and redub all of his lines in post-production. And the third go is what they went with. So that was him filming and having 2 times in the recording booth to go over the dialogue to get this one right. And this is still how it came out. And it's not the clearest English, but you still understand what he's saying. He's fine. Shut up. And besides, he's got a master's degree in chemical engineering. He's a 3rd Dan black belt in karate. He was a European karate champion for 1980 and 81. And he was awarded a Fulbright scholarship to MIT before Grace Jones convinced him to drop out of school and move to New York to become
Objection, relevancy, Your Honor.
The fact that if he can accomplish all that, we can forgive him for not having the cleanest English that you've ever heard in a movie. That's the relevance. And the final positive for this film, Frank Langella. Your Honor, need I expound upon that?
You need not. Frank Langella as Skeletor is a delight. It is just, it's, continue, sir.
Absolutely the best part of the film, he is. His speech at the end as he is opening up the doors so the great eye of the universe can shine upon him. And he delivers that wonderful monologue as he is receiving and achieving that power. I made my stepson sit down and watch this film with my wife and I. This is probably 4 or 5 years ago. So he was, I think he was not yet 10. And I know that with a film this old, a 9-year-old is going to have some trouble staying engaged and staying focused. But before Skeletor began that monologue, I paused the film and I turned to him and I said, okay, I need you to watch the screen. I need you to close your mouth because this is seriously the best part of the movie. That's how good Frank Langella is. And he's still, to this day, if you ask him in an interview, what is your favorite role that you've ever played, he's going to say Skeletor. Defense rests.
I have.
Thank you.
Okay, so I agree that this is not a bad movie. It was actually on my list. It was one of the movies I was going to bring up, so I'll bring up the points that I had. You can argue that the movie has horrible special effects. You can argue that it had the budget of a Saturday Night Live sketch, and it's not really clear as to why it was greenlit in the first place, other than to sell more toys. But you have to hand it to Frank Langella. He later won an Oscar, not for this, but he did win an Oscar. He was an Oscar-winning actor. He gave a lot of what I love about this movie is nostalgia, because I loved He-Man when I was a kid. And the fact that they made a live action movie based off of a cartoon that I watched every day was a big deal for me. And Frank Langella as Skeletor was terrifying, because Skeletor was a comical character. He was an idiot. He was Cobra Commander, basically. And Frank Langella played him as a real villain, even though he was wearing a Party City Halloween mask. He still
don't poop on the mask. That makeup was looking good. Okay, maybe it didn't look like an actual bone skull, but
yeah, well, Skeletor also had muscles, So.
That makeup was pretty creeptastic.
Yeah, I mean that's what the eyes are what did it, and it was his eyes, and he acted with his eyes. But yeah, those are my arguments. I agree that this is not a horrible movie. Virginia, have you ever seen Masters of the Universe?
I have not.
Okay,
I don't know if it's really
you need to put it on your
convincing me
list.
I will say I've never seen it.
Hey, Your Honor, based on the fact that the other counselors have not even seen the film,
I move for a dismissal.
Yeah.
No,
I feel like I'm considering dismissing the other counselors.
Well, in my defense, I've only ever heard that it was a terrible film. and actually,
who are you talking to?
Objection, hearsay.
This is a terrible film.
I'm not saying that it's a terrible film. I'm saying I've only ever heard that it's a terrible film. I reserve judgment as I have not seen it. Full disclosure to the court. And while counsel was making their arguments, I turned on my Roku, and because I thought that I had seen that it is available on something that I have, and in fact it is. So Masters of the Universe is on Amazon Prime. So it is, if you subscribe to that service, it is is available for review. And I'll probably be watching it within the next day or two, for what it's worth.
All right, Judge.
Once again, testimony that I cannot allow because it was not presented to me. In its defense, it contained the song "Living in a Box" by the band, also called "Living in a Box."
Wow.
Which contained the lyric, "Living in a box, living in a cardboard box." But I cannot add that to the defense, so I cannot consider that as evidence. Also, in one of the court's other positions at the Dragon Con American Sci-Fi Classics track, I had the honor, I dare say, of having the set designer of this movie in person. And this man is like a 70s avant-garde motorcycle riding dude with a big, legit, this man his name is William Stout. And that is the most 70s name that I've ever encountered. And this dude is, he built the sets from out of his brain. He designed it all himself with no help from the studio, because they just said, well, we have these toys. He just did the whole thing. He looked at the Castle Grayskull, and that was it. That was all he looked at. And so this movie, as the defense counselors noted, it's He-Man. And also I disregard both the hearsay that the movie is bad, and also anyone who would say that. I will put those people in jail. I will put them in jail tonight. That is ridiculous. This court rejects such hearsay.
Is that contempt, Judge?
That is, Ken. I hold them in personal and professional contempt. Whoever told Counselor Irons that this movie was bad, send me the names of those people, and I will direct them to Sci-Fi Movie Law Enforcement.
I plead the fifth, Your Honor. I cannot reveal my sources.
It's contempt is waiting on you, sir. But because of the testimony that I cannot consider. The testimony that I can consider are the defenses of Mr. Frank Langella and his portrayal of Skeletor, which is delightful. And they're just the idea that on a 90-minute VHS tape, which this show was, somehow they managed to contain Eternia and the greatness of Dolph Lundgren upon a 90-minute VHS tape. And also they contained the, as noted in the defense, the MIT scholarliness of Mr. Dolph Lundgren. This movie has no equal in the fact that Dolph Lundgren used as much of his intelligence as he possibly could in this movie, and also a sword. So I say this movie is not guilty of being bad, and also anyone who says it is guilty of being a butthole.
I think the only thing that I really don't like about Masters of the Universe is the fact that we never get to see him hold aloft his magic sword and say, by the power of Grayskull, and turn into He-Man, because that was such an iconic thing from the cartoon. Every kid that went to see this movie was waiting for him to do that, and it never happened.
I feel like, didn't he do that?
Okay, so during the climax of the film, he gets his hands on the sword and he pulls it out of the little holder that Skeletor put it in, and he raises it up and he shouts, "I have the power," but he doesn't change. He doesn't physically change
from Prince Adam to, and then he doesn't, and Battle Cat's not even there.
Right. You know what?
Absence of
he lifts it up.
Is a strong negative.
It shines some light. He says the words, and then he takes a pose and faces off with Skeletor before they start their fight. And then at the end of the film, when Girl from Friends and Tom Paris look at the little blue marble that they got, and they're looking at that, and the camera zooms in on the marble, and the shot takes us back to Eternia, and there's He-Man in his full, dress-up clothes, which is still no shirt, but he has a cape on his shoulders now and some straps across his chest, and he's still wearing his underwear and no pants. At that point, he does raise up the sword and say, "I have the power," and there's a big light shining behind him, along with Castle Grayskull behind him. That's the closest we get to a recreation from the cartoon. But he does not change from Prince Adam to He-Man. But I will forgive them not giving us that shot, Sean, because he was not Prince Adam in this movie. His Prince Adam.
I was going to ask, is Prince Adam anything in this?
No, not even mentioned. As
he doesn't have the short bob haircut and the pink shirt.
Right. They excised the alter ego persona aspect entirely.
All right, I'm going to do mine.
Confession from the judge, I almost walked out when I found out there was no Battle Cat in this movie. But
no Orko either. Yeah.
And
wasn't Orko like a little gnome-looking guy?
Orko was like a ghost. He was a floating T-shirt and hat.
Okay.
With a big O.
A miniature wizard
so effectively it's free, so I'm still going to watch it.
A miniature wizard robe with a miniature wizard pointy hat, and he would float around, but it would have been cost prohibitive to have a floating character like that.
Yeah.
Instead, they got a real midget.
Right, so they replaced him with Billy Barty as Wildor, the inventor.
It would not have been cost prohibitive if they'd done it right. You get some arts and crafts and put it on a string, and then green up.
That would have been worse.
The defense is over. Why are we still litigating this case?
He-Man's standing there talking in his thick accent that you can barely understand, and he's got a puppet. Just like floating.
Excuse me, Yoda's a puppet.
Yeah, but
I rest my case.
This has a budget of
What if I'm the judge?
We do not allow double jeopardy in this courtroom.
All right, let me do mine.
There's no double jeopardy in this court.
Let me do mine. Okay. All right, mine is Last Action Hero from 1993.
Okay.
I would argue that this is not only not a bad movie, this is a great movie. It's especially good if you're a fan of the action film genre, and if you have some knowledge of Arnold Schwarzenegger films, because it not only plays with those tropes and parodies those tropes, it is exactly those things. It pokes fun at action movies while it is also being a really good action movie. It had a lot of smart movie jokes, like having this action character that Arnold Schwarzenegger plays meet the real Arnold Schwarzenegger in real life. Had a movie poster that had Sylvester Stallone as the Terminator. I'd love to have that poster. I need to have that poster hanging behind me. And Charles Dance, the future Tywin Lannister, as a creepy villain that had a fake eye that he can change out when the mood suits him. He had a glass eye that was a smiley face at one point, and things like that. So the movie got a bad rap when it came out because, number one, it came out opposite Jurassic Park, and it didn't have much of a chance against that T-Rex of a film. And it was also marketed as a kids movie, complete with a tie-in at either Burger King or McDonald's. It had a kid in it.
Did Sean freeze for anyone else?
Yes.
Connection. Oh,
the last thing we heard you say was it had a kid in it.
It had a kid in it.
I'm glad that's the last thing you heard me say, because the next sentence would have been even more hilarious for hold on, let me make sure I'm still recording. I am
still says Sean is recording.
So it had a kid in it, but it also had a premature ejaculation joke.
Wow.
So that is definitely not a kid's movie. But I would argue that it is not a bad movie. I rest. Scott, what do you think about Last Action Hero?
I think I pulled a muscle in my ribs laughing at Joe calling the Masters of the Universe detractors buttholes. I object. That movie sucks.
Wow.
The script was, in my opinion, it was half-baked. The concept is strong, but they didn't execute it very well. I don't think they did a good job of really clearly defining how the crossover, the interaction between the quote real world and the Jack Slater film universe world, how that really operates. So we're left to just kind of go along for whatever ride the movie decides to give us, whether it makes a lot of sense or not. Charles Dance, yes, he's awesome. I'm also a big fan of F. Murray Abraham, who happens to be in this movie and does a fine job. But at the time this film was made, Arnold Schwarzenegger had not quite developed the comedy chops that he would. He's a funny guy. He can do funny, but he wasn't used to doing funny at this point, and it shows. And for a film that is trying so hard to be hilarious, it stumbled along the way quite a bit. I'm also usually not a big fan of kid actors because kid actors can't act usually.
Wow.
So, so it can be hard to enjoy watching them on screen. Now they did a lot of impressive stuff with the use of old stock footage to bring actors and characters from old movies to bring them into the modern day in the police station, with all like the old movie cops are getting together, and you get Bogey talking with whoever he was talking to, nice moments like that. But it doesn't make up for a story that could have used a bit more development, a bit more time to cook before they actually decided to put it on screen.
All right, John.
I will grant that Last Action Hero was probably a great film in the Jack Slater universe, but in ours, not so much.
One final twist of the knife. All right. I stand with Sean on this. I enjoyed it. Again, I feel you have to judge a movie on its own terms. And The Last Action Hero is the definition of a popcorn film. It's big explosions, it's action, it's comedy, 2-3 fart jokes, I believe. I don't remember the ejaculation scene, but the fart joke was like a set piece.
let me clarify. There was not an ejaculation scene. There was a joke. That's a completely different movie.
Bailiff, I will regain control of this court.
But no, it was. I agree. There was even a couple of moments of actual like heart. Like you said, when the Jack Slater, who, good for you guys for remembering his name because I did not. when movie Arnold Schwarzenegger meets acting Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's like, you ruined my life. I was like, oh, yeah. Now I feel kind of bad for all these movies I watched. Yeah, and Tywin Lannister was a really good villain. He was a really good villain. I'll stand him up to any James Bond bad guy. He was a great villain. And I will acknowledge that the howls of crossing universes wasn't really explained, but he had a magic ticket. What more do you need? Like, explain it was magic. Magic is the explanation. That's how it worked because it was magic. Yeah, and it may be that I was the perfect target audience for this film, as Sean was. Teenage boy was probably like the whose DNA they sampled to find out like what to put in this movie. But it worked, and I haven't seen it in years, but I would suspect that it holds up as something a teenage boy would enjoy very much. wasn't a bad film. I stand with Sean.
Virginia, have you ever seen it?
It is on our list. I have not seen it, but I think Shane has. Y'all's names are entirely too confusing. Shane, Sean, John, all iterations of the same name.
And let me point out that it took us 136 episodes to say the word ejaculation on this show.
I don't think that's correct. But
all right, Judge.
That's just what we've said it like 6 times. So it's
we have said it repeatedly now.
Our quota has been met for the next 136 episodes all at once. The court is torn on this movie because however, so many of the people in this movie did other very good things, and what strikes me, and again, testimony that I cannot use in my judgment that was not presented to me, was the fact there were lots of wacky cameos, more so than your usual amount of wacky cameos, because the wacky cameos were used as comedy in a movie that presents itself as mostly a comedy, although, however, there were no comedians in this movie except one. And I will table that discussion for a second and go back to, of course, the wacky cameos do not a movie make. However, Schwarzenegger has been funnier in better movies. So I'll have to rule. I can't rule on his contribution as a comedian. Here is why I am ruling this movie guilty of being bad.
Tried.
Here is why I'm doing so. For the sole reason. Now, in its defense, again, it did contain Professor Sub-Zero from The Running Man in another. However, in its the reason for the guilty verdict is it's an ostensibly comic movie that contained one comedian in it, Art Carney, and it killed him. This was his last movie.
Oh man.
This was the last movie that Art Carney was in. The Star Wars Holiday Special did not kill Art Carney.
Wow.
But this movie did.
He lasted another 16 years.
Yeah. Yes. He survived the Star Wars Holiday Special for 15 years. But this movie did it. Not old age, of course, or some other human sickness.
No.
It
Who's
was
ever died of old
movie.
age?
So
I just presumed the bad movies were cumulative, and it's built up in his system.
It's like a tumor that just kept growing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like the football players. Okay, but if you ever play again, you're gonna break your neck. You're fine as long as you just don't get close to the field.
All right. What we're gonna do is I told everybody to bring 3 movies, and we've only gotten to 1, and we're like an hour and 20 minutes in. So, what we're gonna do we're gonna go around and do one more movie, but you pick a movie and just give 2 or 3 sentences for your argument. Everybody else just either you agree or you object. Okay.
Exactly. I'm gonna clear the docket.
Yeah, and we want
clearing the docket. Guilty, not guilty.
So we'll go around. Scott, what's the next one on your list?
Oh geez. What's it gonna be? All right, let's say Best of the Best from 1989 with an IMDb score of 6.4 out of 10. A lot of people think that this movie is it's weak and soft, and for a martial arts film, it's not exciting. But it's hard to go wrong with a martial arts film from the 80s and 90s. You can call it a kid-friendly blood sport. And it's hard to deny a film that has Eric Roberts just absolutely giving it everything he's got as the lead. He's not afraid to cry on screen. He's a man. And the coach of the American karate team that is training to go fight in Korea, played by James Earl Jones. And one of the highlight moments of the film, right near the end, James Earl Jones at the edge of the ring, watching one of his fighters who is really trying to decide whether or not to kill his opponent, and the camera holds on James Earl Jones as he just says, "No." That's how he says it. I don't know what to tell you, but it's just fun to watch him just that single word answer with that intonation. It's a lot of fun. It's a fun movie to watch. Go watch it. Don't hate it.
I have no argument because I don't think I've ever seen it.
Same.
Okay, Judge.
Not guilty of being bad.
Okay.
Because the title itself says Best of the Best.
Nice.
All right, Virginia, what about you?
Right there in the title.
I'm going to go with the 2016 version of Ghostbusters. Because a bunch of people love to hate that movie, dudes. But I don't think it's a matter of comparing it to the originals. Like, I love the originals. I own all of them, even the second one. But I think there were a lot of plot holes in it, but I liked seeing the interaction between the women and how funny they are. And it really makes me happy that my nieces and nephews can search female Ghostbuster costumes for Halloween, and it's not going to come up with sexy Ghostbuster costume. It's going to be like Holtzman or Patty or something like that. I really liked all the nods they gave to the original too, which really surprised me that people who loved the original didn't really like it, because they sort of pay tribute to that stuff. So I think it just got a really bad rap, which I think we've talked about on here before. But I think it's really good despite its flaws.
I agree. I like that movie.
I agree as well. I enjoyed it.
Damn it, Scott.
No. Give me a chance. I have my issues with it, but when I force myself to look at it as its own film, I cannot say it's a bad film.
Yeah. I can't look at it as a sequel to Ghostbusters, but yeah, on its own, it's a decent film. Judge?
The judge, as judge, I'm ruling it not guilty of being a bad movie, and I'm also ruling it hilarious because my daughter and my wife laughed throughout this entire movie. I also laughed, for the judge is a human being, not an automaton. However, my daughter and my wife laughed out of their guts for an hour and a half at this movie.
That makes me so happy.
It was so much fun, and also the performance of Thor as himself, basically.
Oh my God, the Disney secretary.
Good. And Leslie Jones again as herself, also great. And thirdly, I would also, while I'm rendering this movie not guilty of being bad, I'm rendering anyone who complained about this movie guilty of being a double butthole.
The rarely invoked double butthole.
I would also consider rendering the double buttholes as slap nuts, because that is also terrible.
Just throw the book at him. It's everything.
All right, John, what you got?
When I found out that Rick wasn't going to be able to make it, my heart broke a little bit. The Fifth Element. Short defense, that movie is great. It is funny. It is action packed. The acting, whatever. The plot,
who needs a plot? Who needs a plot?
There's enough of a plot. There's 5 elements, and he has to get them all. That's the plot.
The end.
That's the end. And he's indestructible, and he's action guy, and he hits everybody with the bullets, and nobody hits him. It is again for the same reason that The Last Action Hero is great. The Fifth Element is great. I will by proxy give the Rick the reason the movie sucks is because of Chris Tucker.
Yeah.
He ruined the movie. No, he didn't. He played an extreme character. He really only shows up like the second half of the film, and he is a goofy comic relief in an already over the top film. He was fine. I actually thought it was great. His introduction scene is one of the best scenes in all of cinema. where he is going through and Ruby Red and yes, I mean it is a frenetic roller coaster of joy. And yes, if they wanted to make a 6th element, I am on board.
Ruby Rod's introduction is like the opening scene of Moulin Rouge, just an assault on the senses.
Yeah, yeah. I like this character. I did think that he was a little overused. He should have been in less of the movie than he was, but I liked him for the most part. And
I felt like he was necessary because parts of without the action scenes, the scenes with just Bruce Willis and Mila
Jovovich.
Yeah, they're kind of boring, which is the worst thing that can happen in this film. I don't care if you're smart. I don't care if you're believable, but you can't be boring in a movie like this. Mm-hmm. And the movie slows down when it's just the two of them, making Google eyes. And so Ruby Rod is the necessary panacea to that. He is the solution to that problem. So even in his overness, he is necessary.
I agree. It's not a bad movie. Scott, Virginia.
I haven't seen it in a really long time, so I actually don't remember anything about it.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think the movie is awesome. There's no way that person can consider it a bad film. I showed it to my stepson. My wife was unhappy because you get a very brief glimpse of Jovovich's boobies. But it's out of focus and it's way in the background, so who cares? It's no big deal.
I was going to say, I don't remember that.
Yeah, I was looking. So
twice.
If he caught it, good on him. Sorry, Nicole.
On orders from my wife, I told him to close his eyes when those scenes came up.
Oh yeah, because that works.
It actually does. He gets really awkward and uncomfortable if something like that comes on screen.
Yeah, especially if your parents are in the room.
True.
All right, Judge, what's the verdict?
The judge renders as follows. The verdict is not guilty of being a bad movie, and the Mr. Counselor Rick, who via hearsay would not like this movie, I render him a stick in the mud.
All right. My last pick is going to be Dante's Peak from 1997.
Oh my Lord.
In 1997, we had competing volcano movies because you had Tommy Lee Jones trying to save LA from becoming a volcano, and you had Pierce Brosnan in Dante's Peak that was studying an inactive volcano that woke up and blew up a town. So while this movie is slow to start, and you might wonder why Linda Hamilton chose to do this instead of more Terminator sequels, and why scenes inside the volcano look like they were filmed in a studio backlot, you can't deny that. You can't deny. You can't deny that Pierce Brosnan gives a smoldering post GoldenEye performance as a widowed volcanologist, because he made a statement that his wife or his girlfriend, I can't remember which, she loved volcanoes, but she was killed by one. I'd rather see that movie, really. But Brosnan.
You sure they're in the defense?
Brosnan, he makes a statement that he's better at figuring out volcanoes than people, but he's able to get the mayor to fall head over heels in love with him in one day. And he escapes an erupting volcano with nothing but a broken arm. And he drives a car over lava. The tires melt, and he still drives it. So,
I mean, he's James Bond.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and this was after his first James Bond film. He was no longer the guy from Remington Steele. He was now the guy from GoldenEye. So, yeah. Hey, have any of you guys ever seen Dante's Peak?
I think I saw it in the theater. I remember it being like a fun disaster movie. I enjoyed it. I don't remember much about it though, except when the people dissolved in like the acidic hot springs or whatever, because they thought it was just the water, but it was really getting all of the crap from the volcano already. That was a little disturbing, since I can recall it like 22 years later.
No, I never saw it.
Okay. Got
Dante's Peak was the Deep Impact of volcano movies. I watched the Armageddon of volcano movies, which was Volcano with Tommy Lee Jones.
No, we can argue Armageddon and Deep Impact.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not sure where you're going with that.
I'm not sure if you made the right choice. All right, Judge.
I render this movie not guilty of being bad on account of James Bond portrayed the Volcano Man. And secondly, this man acted with a volcano. This man acted on the set with a real volcano, I'm guessing. I don't know the details of the backstage. But also, what we must consider is the handicap of Pierce Brosnan having acted in this movie as greatly as he did while having previously in Mrs. Doubtfire being the victim of a run-by fruiting. This man is an actor. He survived the run-by fruiting, and then a few years later, it's a volcano. Why? Why would he put himself through that? Because he is a genius. That is why, sir. I almost said GoldenEye is not guilty. It is. It isn't. But Dante Speak is also not guilty.
All right, this was fun. So, homework is to watch Spider-Man: Far From Home, and we'll get together in a couple of weeks and talk about it.
I'm going in 12 hours. Stop guilting me.
And Masters of the Universe on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, Masters of the Universe. I've seen Masters of the Universe, so.
Probably
well, apparently not. Apparently you haven't, sir.
It's been years. It's been years. All right, here's a funny story.
Your sentence is you have to go and see.
That's not
the Amazon Primes.
No chance of parole.
I have a funny story about Masters of the Universe. So when I was,
I'll be the judge of that.
Hey guys, I think I need to go. My computer is kind of overheating. Which is
okay.
Weird.
Yeah, don't let it catch on fire.
See y'all next time.
All right, bye.
Goodness.
Good night. So when I was probably, I want to say first grade, I went to a private church school when I was in the kindergarten and first grade. And I used to get in trouble all the time because we didn't have a classroom setting where we were sitting in desks and our teacher was in front of us teaching us. We had more of a cubicle setup. Everyone was sitting in little cubicles and we had workbooks that we worked out of all day. It was very boring. And if we had a question for the teacher, we had these little flags that we would put up on the top of our cubicle. We had a little hole drilled up there for you to put your flag. If you wanted to talk to the teacher, you put up a little Christian flag. And if you wanted to talk to the administrator of the classroom, which she was over several grades, then you put up the American flag. So I used to get in trouble because I sat at my desk and played with my flags as though they were He-Man action figures. And I would not get my work done. I constantly got in trouble for it to the point that my dad would not let me watch He-Man in the mornings when I was getting ready for school anymore. So
I feel like that's more the fault of the flag system that they had in this.
Oh yeah. Looking back, it was an awful system. But well, I mean, you give a 6-year-old kid a couple of flags and expect him not to play with them. I mean, come on. And I was like a ADD type kid anyway, you know. So the movie came out and I was like, Dad, I want to go see Masters of the Universe. And he was like, no, I told you, you're not allowed to watch He-Man. And looking back on it now, I'm like, he just didn't want to take me to see that movie. It had nothing to do with that. So I didn't get to see it in the theater, but I watched it, got it from the video store. Remember those?
Were you happy with it when you saw it?
Well, yeah, when I was a kid. Looking back, when I watch it now, and I've watched it within the last 3 or 4 years or so, and it is very dated as far as special effects and stuff like that. But there are things about that movie that are great. Like Frank Langella, just his performance. He does not.
All right. We know. We heard it.
He doesn't play it.
I'm gonna watch it.
The interior set design for Castle Grayskull, I didn't really focus on that as much as I meant to, but for a film with a Canon Films budget like that one, Joe, you had it right talking about Henry Stout. Was it Henry or Harry? William Stout did such a good job with that Castle Grayskull interior set, because to see it in a cartoon, the interior of Castle Grayskull was basically a great big empty room that was so dark you couldn't see the walls, but there was really nothing going on in there, and that was the only room you ever saw in this entire castle. When you buy the play set, that doesn't give you a sense of the inside of it. And you open it up and it's a couple little plastic shelves with stickers on them, and that's your rooms. No. Stout put together a really impressive set with the matte painting that gave the impression of the lower level on either side of that catwalk. huge expansive room with the statues on either side that Dolph Lundgren pushed over because he just goddamn impressive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. See,
they had a contest. They had a contest back then. I think it was in one of the magazines that you could enter this contest, and if you won, you would win a role in Masters of the Universe. And it was won by a 9-year-old kid whose name I don't know.
That's good, because that'd be kind of creepy if you remember that.
he goes to Hollywood or wherever they filmed that. I'm imagining they filmed it in Los Angeles somewhere. And they put him in a pig costume that you could not recognize him. He was heavily made up. And he was basically one of the creatures in Skeletor's palace or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the final edit of the film, he was on the screen for like a nanosecond, just like that. But he's like, I'm in a movie.
and I remember those characters.
I'm on the screen for a second, but there you go.
And I kind of wanted to mention this during court, but I knew it would have been too much of a tangent. But does anyone still on the call know anything about the intended sequel for Masters of the Universe?
I know that it was rewritten into a Jean-Claude Van Damme film that I can't remember the name of now.
That is correct. That is indeed correct.
Nice.
They had put together a story for it, but it never ended up coming together. They had hinted at it at the very end of the movie. Even way back then, they still did post-credit scenes every now and again. If you stay till the end of the credits, you see Skeletor come back up out of the water, look at the camera, and say, "I'll be back." Now, would he have been in the sequel? I don't know. But they had started putting together sets and costumes for it, and then the entire project fell through. But they still got these sets and these costumes that they've made. What can we use them for? Hey, here we go. Let's take a few elements from this abandoned Masters of the Universe sequel script. We'll dress it up with some other stuff that we have lying around, with some other script elements we have lying around. Boom, you got Cyborg with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
I was going to say, I bet they made Cyborg, didn't they?
Yep.
Now that is a truly terrible movie. That is quite probably the worst movie in the world.
We'll have a whole other court session.
I'll go back and rewatch it, and if I can put together an argument, then I'll present that as a case.